is the judgment of the court that you be sentenced to 6 years confinement. There's a 25 fine.
You will be held in contempt of this court if you become disruptive.
Thank you.
Okay. She'll be arrested for 10 days for contempt of court. You go now.
While the judge hands down life sentences, the expressions of these female cartel members change, and the irrevocable reality dawns upon them. Their perilous journey through the criminal underworld has led to an inescapable and haunting destination. So, here are 10 female cartel members reacting to life sentences. Number 10. Angie Sanclemente, Valencia. Now, how do you go from having a successful modeling career to facing charges as a ringleader for one of the world's largest drug syndicates? Well, that's a question only Angie here can provide an answer to. Miss Valencia was known to the public as a Colombian beauty queen and lingerie model, but in the underground world of narcotics, she was a leader of this drug trafficking ring. You can call her the Cleopatra of cocaine, as she knew how to sway men with her beauty, especially policemen, to steer away from drug trafficking schemes. May 25, 1977 marked her birth in Colombia, and by the time she was old enough, Valencia came into the drug scene after winning a beauty pageant in the early 2000s. She would then form her own cartel with a bunch of ravishingly sexy models known as Angie's Angels. She got the idea of starting this very unsuspicious cartel after breaking up with her boyfriend, who was a major drug lord in Mexico at the time. His name was El Monstruo, but I think it's safe to say Valencia did almost as good, if not better, than El Monstruo, and that's because she didn't have to stain her hands with blood or order any killings. All she needed were her girls, transporting cocaine from Argentina to England in briefcases and bags. She paid him as high as $5,000 per trip. However, one of the models, named Ariel L., was caught en route with 121 pounds of coke in her suitcase at the Ezeiza International Airport in Argentina. The young naive smuggler eventually ratted out Valencia, making the International Criminal Police Organization, aka Interpol, issue a warrant for her arrest. At first, Valencia went into hiding, but was found a few weeks after in a local hostel, lodged under a different name. On May 27, 2010, she was imprisoned just 2 days after her 31st birthday, and was subsequently released on September 27, 2013, after the Argentine government banned her from ever entering their country. She successfully served half of her initial 6-year sentence, but till today, no one knows for sure what exactly happened to Angie Valencia next. Number 9. Jessica Oseguera Gonzalez. If the name Oseguera rings a bell, well, that's because Jessica's the daughter of Mexico's infamous drug lord and leader of the CJNG, El Mencho. But unlike her father, Jessica was arrested and extradited to the US, where she got to pay for both her sins and the sins of her father. July 23, 1986, marked the birth of Jessica Gonzalez to Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes and Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia in San Francisco, California. After spending a few years in the U.S., Jessica traveled to Mexico, where she obtained a marketing degree from a university in Guadalajara, before getting mixed in with her father in the drug trafficking business. Now, she would help the CJNG launder money through a series of illegal businesses designated by the Office of Foreign Asset Control in the U.S. These companies included a sushi restaurant, a cabana resort, a tequila label, an agricultural company, and an advertising firm, along with 4 other companies belonging to Jessica. February 26, 2020. U.S. authorities would apprehend Jessica at a Washington courthouse, attending this preliminary hearing for her brother, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez. She was charged with criminal violation of the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, as well as having financial dealings with the CJNG. If you didn't know already, the CJNG is a multi-billion-dollar criminal organization with at least 5,000 members across every continent except Antarctica. Her father, El Mencho, has been designated a kingpin in the U.S. since 2015, with a $10 million bounty put up for any information that could lead to his arrest. That made Jessica a key factor that could be exploited to know more about El Mencho's business and operations. But she was a dead end. She claimed she hadn't seen her father since she was 11, and he left her mother back in '96 after being deported back to Mexico. She was kept in jail for 15 months. Before finally pleading guilty to the charges against her, she was given a 2-year sentence and required to pay a $20,500 fine. That was a huge setback for the 4-year sentence and $5 million fine prosecutors fought for. but her physical reaction couldn't be captured due to the fact that her sentencing was done over video conferencing. Now, one photo was taken during her arraignment showing her emotionless reaction while she stares deep into the camera. She was held at this low-security federal correctional institution in Dublin, California, before her release in March 2022. Number 8. Luz Irene Fajardo Campos. That was the reaction of Irene Campos moments after she found out she'd be spending the rest of her life locked up behind bars. July 27, 2021. Fajardo Campos, also known on the streets as La Madrina, was sentenced to 22 years to life imprisonment for trafficking cocaine and meth from Colombia through Mexico and into the U.S. She was born in the rural town of Gonzalez, close to Mexico's famous Golden Triangle region, where the cultivation of marijuana and heroin poppies a way for life for communities. Despite this, Fajardo didn't immediately jump into the drug scene. She grew up with her middle-class parents before getting certified as a lawyer and starting a new life with her 2 sons. Now, between 2010 and 2016, Fajardo threw aside her legal mantle to defend the law and adorned herself with a role in trafficking cocaine into the U.S. She worked as an associate for the Sinaloa Cartel and got connected with a perfect drug trafficking route from Colombia through Panama and Ecuador, all the way to Mexico. She would then use small cargo planes to ship hundreds of kilos into the U.S. to avoid getting spotted by the DEA. For the most part, she was successful, but the biggest mistake she made was getting her sons involved in her dirty work. April 2017, Fajardo was arrested in Bogota, Colombia during a business trip and eventually extradited to the U.S. But shortly after that, something crazy happened. Her 2 teenagers, whose names remain unknown, were picked up in the city of Hermosillo in the state of Sonora and mercilessly killed. Their bodies were found dismembered and burned in a vehicle. Some say their death was orchestrated by a rivaling trafficking organization to discontinue the illegal enterprise of their mother, while others say it was a message from the powers that be in Sinaloa for their mother to keep her mouth shut. Whatever the case may be, it had a huge impact on Fajardo. Her mental health declined after a while on trial and she was taken to a mental facility at some point. If killing her sons was truly a way to silence her, it definitely worked. And just like her sons, the rest of her family remain in grave danger, while she may never get to see him again. Number 7. Emma Coronel Aispuro.
Meanwhile, the wife of the notorious Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has been sentenced to 3 years in prison for her role in helping the Sinaloa cartel.
November 30th, 2021. Ex-beauty queen and wife of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Emma Aispuro, faced a bitter end after getting sentenced to 3 years in prison on charges related to her direct involvement with the Sinaloa cartel. July 1989. Coronel was born near San Francisco, California, to mother Blanca Estela Aispuro and father Inés Coronel Barreras, who was a cattle rancher and deputy to El Chapo. She grew up in the small village of Durango, where she was eventually crowned a beauty queen. In 2007, Coronel joined the Coffee and Guava Festival beauty pageant in her small village. And as a requirement for joining this pageant, contestants were to host a party in honor of their candidacy. Coronel held hers on Three Kings Day, which is the day set aside for Christians to revere Jesus. But it seemed the devil came out to play that day, as it was the day she met and married Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Yeah, you heard that right. Joaquin traveled all the way to Canales, Durango to meet Coronel, and despite the fact that she was just a teenager, they both agreed to get married. But their marriage wasn't the only shocking event that occurred in the days that followed. Coronel was voted the local coffee and guava queen over 4 other contenders, only after hundreds of black-clad gunmen on motorcycles flooded the town, with El Chapo already throwing a lavish party to celebrate his wife. There was no way she could have been denied the crown, as well as El Chapo's marriage proposal. February 22, 2021. Coronel was arrested at Dulles International Airport for her involvement in Guzman's escape from the Federal Social Rehabilitation Center No. 1 and for helping coordinate another escape attempt before his extradition to the U.S. She accepted a plea deal and was given a 3-year sentence, which was eventually reduced to 31 months. No cameras were allowed in the courtroom during that sentencing, but from the drawings we can see Coronel was wearing a green jumpsuit with a face mask on as the judge read out his verdict. She was released on September 13, 2023. Number 6. Guadalupe Fernandez Valencia.
Guadalupe Fernandez Valencia, known as La Patrona. Valencia was among the highest-ranked female drug executives of any Mexican cartel.
Guadalupe was regarded as the highest-ranking female in the Sinaloa cartel. She and El Chapo were tagged the duo of destruction for their ruthlessness when it came to making decisions. But in a turn of events, that name lived up to its applause as they both got destroyed by the weight of justice during their individual sentencing. August 2021. Valencia receives a 3-year sentence, compounded by time already served in prison. Before her apprehension, though, her journey into this criminal underworld had roots in the 1990s, when she migrated from Mexico to California, establishing herself with a few associates in the narcotics underworld. Then by the early 2000s, Valencia delved into the drug trade, collaborating with her brother Manuel to transport cocaine from Mexico to the U.S. And despite a drug trafficking conviction in California and a subsequent 10-year sentence, she returned to Mexico in 2011, only to resume her illicit activities. She served as the right-hand woman to Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, known as Alfredillo, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. And given the fact that she largely operated under the radar, she became the only woman named in the indictment that led to El Chapo's life sentence. February 2016. Valencia was arrested in Culiacan, Sinaloa, a month after El Chapo's third arrest. She would spend a year in U.S. custody before extradition. Then 3 years later, she would plead guilty to drug trafficking and money laundering charges in Chicago, opting for cooperation over trial. With time served both in Mexico and the U.S., coupled with good behavior, she was pardoned and handed just 3 years behind bars. If she hadn't cooperated with the feds, she might have been looking at a life sentence. But she got lucky and has been out since October 2023. Number 5. Sandra Avila Beltran.
Sandra, ¿a qué te dedicas? Al hogar y al comercio.
Sandra here might be one of the reasons why you should never judge a book by its cover, because on the outside we have a very pretty, innocent-looking lady, but on the inside, Sandra's a notorious drug lord in the narcotics underworld. October 16, 1960. Sandra was born in Baja California, Mexico. And as she grew older, she became an integral link between El Chapo Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and the Colombian Norte del Valle cartel. She would also be the mastermind behind the transportation of cocaine through speedboats that went undetected for years in Mexico. With her charming looks, she reportedly dated top-tier drug dealers in her youth, but got married twice to police commanders, who were both assassinated in a similar fashion. Many people believe she put out those hits, probably using them as pawns to run her narcotics empire. But while we can't confirm nor deny that rumor, Sandra Avila Beltran entered the radar of Mexican authorities back in 2002 after she paid a $5 million ransom for her son, who was kidnapped by rival cartels. That raised suspicions about her income, and after 4 years and a few months of intense investigations, a 30-man police squad finally arrested her in a Mexican uptown restaurant on September 28, 2007. But like I said before, Sandra was a very beautiful lady and wasn't afraid to flaunt that beauty. So before that arrest, somehow, she convinced the police she needed to touch her face up with makeup slightly, just to make sure her mugshot looked pretty. And well, from the looks of it, they allowed her, cause that's one good-looking mugshot if you ask us. Also, during her arraignment in court, Sandra smiled to the press, looking unbothered while flaunting her charming smile. She was convicted of trafficking billions of dollars worth of drugs, smuggled from Colombia to Mexico. And after her extradition to the U.S. and a rearrest in 2013, she was finally released and cleared of all charges 2 years later, after 5 years in prison and an additional 2 years in isolation. She now lives a pretty simple life in the city of Guadalajara. Number 4. Clara Elena, Laborin Archuleta. February 2016. Clara was seen in a photo with 2 Mexican federal officers. Her hands were cuffed and her face had no emotions. Here we have Clara, wife of imprisoned drug lord Héctor Beltran Leyva, arrested by Mexican authorities for reportedly planning to restart her husband's drug trafficking trade. In the northern city of Hermosillo, Clara, known as La Señora, faced the relentless pursuit of law enforcement. Her bold attempt to regain control over Acapulco, once dominated by the Beltran Leyva cartel, thrusted her into this dangerous game, a game that had her name appearing on narco banners all around the city. But why exactly was this the case? Well, for starters, her husband L.H. and his three brothers, Arturo, Alfredo, and Carlos, had previously collaborated closely with their cousin, the infamous Sinaloan trafficker, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, to run the city of Acapulco and its cocaine laboratories. However, a rupture in 2008 triggered by the brothers blaming El Chapo for Alfredo's arrest ignited a violent feud resulting in the retaliatory killing of one of Guzman's sons. It also caused a Scarface-style shootout claiming Arturo's life and fracturing the cartel. January 2016, murmurs of a resurgence circulated, especially after El Chapo's recapture. Members of the independent cartel of Acapulco, the cartel now responsible for drug trade in the city, presumed it was probably El Chapo's son trying to take over. But it was La Señora. Her quest to continue the work of her husband led her to a strong alliance with the powerful Jalisco New Generation cartel. And we all know those guys are ready for war any day, anytime. And you have to give her some credit here, because she had some pretty smart plans. However, due to some failed negotiations caused by one CJ&G hitman, Los Rusos, she ended up behind bars. Caught in the crossfire of these power dynamics, Laborin Archuleta found herself arrested a few weeks later. She was apprehended with 2 kilos of cocaine and firearms. Then she'd be taken to custody, and like many sentences for cartel members, no cameras were allowed in the courtroom. But judging from that one picture from the arrest, she may have some regrets when she's locked away behind bars. Number 3. Evelyn Bosun Papa. Love, crime, and drugs intertwined to shape the harrowing existence Evelyn faced for marrying a drug lord. Evelyn married off in her early teens to a former helicopter pilot for Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. Her husband, Carlos Horacio Romero Paez, later transitioned into directing his own drug smuggling operation in a Colombian seaside city. Then he coerced Evelyn into managing a ring of passengers carrying coke-filled suitcases on commercial flights to Miami. Of course, she initially disagreed, but Carlos beat her to the point where it was no longer a request, it was an order. Their criminal endeavors caught up with them, though, and both Evelyn and Romero Paez became wanted by U.S. authorities. But here's the twist. While Carlos managed to evade capture, Evelyn's life took a devastating turn. In 1995, she fled Colombia with her 4 children, escaping her abusive husband and the entire drug scene. However, her cousin and a courier hired by her husband both ratted her out to the police. This led to her arrest, as she was caught in recorded phone conversations with the cocaine courier and her cousin. In her trial 2 years later, she was convicted of conspiring to import 150 kilos of coke, along with other trafficking offenses and money laundering. Her defense was centered around being a battered wife forced into a supporting role, but it failed, leading to a mandatory life sentence. Her reaction? Well, what would you expect? However, after 26 years, her life took an unexpected turn once again. Her journey to freedom involved a collaborative effort from various individuals, including her 4 grown children in Colombia, a team of former prisoners, a Florida State University law professor, 2 former federal prosecutors, and a retired Customs Service agent who ironically had once contributed to her imprisonment. Following a Miami federal judge's grant of compassionate release, Evelyn flew from Orlando to Bogota, and then finally to her hometown of Barranquilla. Number 2. Melissa Margarita Calderon Ojeda. Melissa here, aka La China, aka Mexico's murder queen, was a serial assassin and drug trafficker. She's solely responsible for over 150 murders in Mexico, but her link to violence is tied to her membership in the Sinaloa cartel. La China joined the cartel at the age of 21, and seeing how efficient she was in her duties, the Sinaloa cartel created a smaller faction called the Damaso Cartel for La China and her then-boyfriend, Eric Davalos von Borstel, to operate. But after she was forcefully removed as the head of the Damaso cartel and her boyfriend killed by the new boss, El Grande, La China decided to wage this bloody war against the Sinaloa cartel and El Grande. La China and her gang killed every associate of El Grande, but the biggest mistake she made was failing to stop the war when she had the chance. After the war escalated to about 133 people being recorded dead, the Mexican police had to step in, linking the origin of this war down to La China. September 20th, 2015, she was identified and arrested at Cabo San Lucas International Airport, where she attempted to board a flight to Culiacan. From the mugshot taken after her arrest, La China's reaction seemed like she was unbothered. and probably had it in mind that that moment was bound to happen. Right now, she's currently imprisoned at La Palma, a max security prison in Mexico. However, many fear she would attempt a prison break, just like El Chapo did from that prison in 2001. After all, they were both a part of the Sinaloa cartel. And number 1. Griselda Blanco. Griselda ran one of the world's deadliest cartels, placing her on the same criminal pedestal as Pablo Escobar, El Chapo, and Frank Lucas. But the interesting thing here is Griselda was a subordinate of Escobar's while he was still the head of the Medellin cartel. February 14, 1943. Griselda was born in Bolivar, Colombia. She was the product of a damaged childhood, and we mean that in a compassionate way. At just 11 years old, she kidnapped a wealthy boy around her neighborhood, attempted to use him for ransom, and eventually killed him in cold blood. This would be her first in a long list of victims. She became a pickpocket before the age of 13 while her mother's boyfriend sexually abused her daily. And after a few years of no parental care and constant abuse, Griselda ran away from home, joined the Medellin cartel, and ran a fraction of it that was based in Miami, painting the town white and red, symbolizing the blood and cocaine being poured all over the city. One person she would take out would be her husband, whom she killed personally over a silly drug deal dispute. This act would give her the nickname Black Widow. Between 1970 and the early 2000s, Blanco successfully transported coke from Miami to New York and Southern California. That distribution in the U.S. reportedly brought in around $80 million per month. But on February 17, 1985, Blanco was arrested at her house by the DEA, charging her with conspiring to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine. Keep in mind that she was arrested and sentenced at a time when camera phones weren't a thing, but from the one picture of her we got to see, she might have been a lot older, but still had a fierce look on her face. This woman served 19 years in prison and was released sometime in 2004. But on September 3, 2012, Griselda Blanco was fatally shot in the head and shoulder by a motorcyclist who entered a shop she was buying groceries from.